Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Panagiotis Kakolyris. I'm a senior research fellow at the Center of International and European Political Economy and Governance of the Department of Political Science and International Relations at the University of Peloponnese, and I'm also a steering committee member at the European Network of the Political Foundations. And I would like to welcome you in this panel focusing on the governance and resilience in the Eastern Neighbourhood. European neighbourhood policy is a foreign relations instrument for the European Union, which seeks to tie those countries, the neighbourhood countries, to the east and the south of the European territory with the European Union. It has also been designed to prevent the emerging new dividing lines between the enlarged EU and the neighbourhoods, the neighbours. This policy was first outlined by the European Commission in 2003 and inaugurated in 2009 in order to promote peace, stability, and economic prosperity in the whole region. But how this policy fulfilled this aspiration, how successful has been proved? The European Union has planned to spend 15.4 billion from 2014 to 2020. Was this budget well spent? Which are the challenges ahead? And what can EU change in order to achieve its targets? These are some main questions, and this panel is taking place at a very timely environment. It is a very timely discussion, having a war between Azerbaijan and Armenia, a war that proved that the weaknesses of the international and the inefficiencies of the international system. And also we have this strange situation with Ukraine. So in this framework, I would like to welcome you to our panel. I will not take more time from our distinguished panelists, and I will start straight ahead with the first panel of Mr. Giorgio, who is an adjunct lecturer at the University of Peloponnese, and Mr. Spyros Blavoukos, who is associate professor at the Athens University of Economics and Business. Their topic is promoting good governance in European Union neighborhood. Good governance is an issue not only outside the European Union, but also inside the European Union, but this is another issue. Gentlemen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Now, allow me just to make an effort in order to share my meeting window. I'm not sure whether this will attempt. I would like to do it in order just to...
now we're only seeing ourselves again.
I'm sorry, but I cannot, my camera doesn't seem to work. I'm Dr. Bayazoglu.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know what has happened. I will try to fix it.
Okay, so I'm not sure whether now we can... Yes?
We cannot see it neither, no.
I think when you press share, you have to select which window you will share, and I think you have selected to share the window that you are seeing right now and not your PowerPoint. That's it. Yeah.
Okay, so perhaps we've chosen the right window.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We all now share the same window, the same PowerPoint. So.
Just to give the time frame, don't exceed the 15 minutes rule, just up to 20 maximum. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll keep it. Thank you once again. So our topic is about promoting good governance in the European Union, Union's neighborhood. We focus actually on the role of subnational authorities in the implementation of the Eastern Partnership. So our starting point of research, in the first place, we all know that the European neighbourhood policy aims at bringing closer EU countries and their neighbours in the eastern and the southern part of the EU. It is an approach based on norms and values such as democracy, human rights, rule of law, and objectives such as stability, security, and sustainable development, for instance, for example. So the main policy tool for this is the European Neighbourhood Instrument, or the ENPI for the 2007-2013 period. And at the same time, the European Neighbourhood Policy, the ENP, allows for subnational mobilization through EU institutions. But how is this done? We know that there is the European Committee of the Regions, which has launched two political platforms, two initiatives. And we, in our project, in our presentation, we focus on the COLIP initiative. So our hypothesis, which we will examine, is about, we argue that local and regional governments play an important role in the implementation phase of the ENP. How is this feasible? Because we do know that there are opportunities for mobilization, opportunities which are provided by the committee through the Committee of the Regions. And we argue that there are two pillars, political and financial opportunities that facilitate, in fact, the subnational mobilization. In terms of our research design, the research question that we seek to address is what are the policy initiatives tools that allow for the Committee of the Regions to effectively participate in the implementation of the ENP. The theoretical framework that we employ is the Europeanization mechanisms of Europeanization and dimensions. Particularly, we focus on the horizontal dimension of the Europeanization, on the Europeanization. We find on the Europeanization literature, as well as policy diffusion, the concept of diffusion, policy transfer and diffusion. Empirical data, we use the European Neighbourhood Instrument. We have collected data for the period 2007 to 2018. Actually, I have to admit that perhaps we were more ambitious, that finally our empirical case and our data show that, because the availability wasn't what we are expecting, in fact. So, and finally, the assessment in terms of our research design, we shall appraise the impact of local and regional institutions on the implementation of the European Neighbourhood Policy. So, very brief overview of the ENP, launched in back in 2003-04, revised into distinct periods in 2011-2015. The rationale is to bring closer EU countries and their neighbourhoods so as to work together on issues regarding prosperity, stability, and security for all. Objectives among them are promoting democratic values and fundamental freedoms, enhancing sectoral and cross-sectoral cooperation, supporting sustainable development and good neighbourly relations. Geographic areas covered eastern and southern parts of the European Union. We focus on the eastern countries, and we use, again, in order to we employ actually empirical data through the ENI instrument. Now, just a few words about the ENP and subnational institutions. The role of subnational authorities, we argue that it is important in terms of implementation. There are opportunities for subnational mobilization. And what is interesting, in fact, is that we argue that this is a policy domain that is traditionally belongs, let's say, the exercise of power in national governments instead of subnational authorities. So by using policy tools such as the COLIP, which has been established by the European Committee of Regions, we shall try to address our hypothesis, our research questions, in order to show how the role of subnational authorities, it is important in this particular policy field. The COLIP initiative, just allow me to say a few things about it. It has been set up in 2011. It is a joint body of local and regional authorities from the European Union and the Eastern Partnership countries, and serves as a platform to discuss the contribution of cities and regions to the development of the Eastern Partnership, such as issues that are on the core of the Eastern Partnership, are promoting democracy, advancing political, economic, and cultural relations. Apart from that, the COLIP initiative serves as a territorial cooperation platform so as to, in order to help strengthening local and regional self-government in the partner countries for reasons of promoting dialogue and cooperation between countries, between subnational authorities in each country, between authorities which are located in the European Union and on at the COLIP countries. Also, another objective that is served through the territorial cooperation is the promotion of contacts between local authorities from partner countries and other EU institutions. And finally, this particular territorial cooperation platform allows for facilitating local democracy, fiscal decentralization, and autonomy both in partner countries and at the EU level. There are 36 subnational authorities which constitute the COLIP initiative. The full name is Conference of Regional Local Authorities for the Eastern Partnership. 18 members come from the Committee of the Regions and 19 members come from the neighboring countries outside the EU, at the eastern frontiers of the EU. So the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities of Europe also, which is a part of the Council of Europe, another regional institution, has observer status within the COLIP. Main areas of interest, at least for the 2016-2017 programming period, was decentralization, public administration reform, policy transfer, good practices, in fact, in the field of public administration and economic development, territorial cooperation through new instruments such as the EGTC, the European Grouping of Territorial Cooperation, and funding opportunities as well. Implementing the European Neighbourhood Policy, and this is we are coming towards our core part of our presentation. As I mentioned, there is the European Neighbourhood Instrument established in 2013 through the 232 regulation. The total budget is almost approximately 15.4 billion euro. Allocation of funds. In terms of the allocation, there are two multi-annual allocations. The first one is just for the first 4 years, and the second for the remaining 3 years. And the allocation of funds, the funds are allocated between bilateral programs, multi-country programs, and cross-border cooperation. And there is a percentage which is related with each one of these parts. For bilateral programs, up to 80% of the budget is will be allocated. Up to 35% of ENI funds will direct it to multi-country programs, and up to 5% for cross-border cooperation. With regards to covered areas, we have human rights and good governance projects about sustainable development, mobility and migration, natural resources, agriculture, transport and infrastructure, education and training, energy, mobility of persons, goods and capital. So this is an overview of the covered areas, just for example, projects that are available for will be financed through the ENI instrument. Now, here we show some preliminary findings with regards to the projects implemented by recipient countries, and we have focused only to the ENP recipients, COLIP actually countries, the 6 countries: Azerbaijan, Armenia, Moldova, and Ukraine also, and Belarus. I think I've mentioned all of them, 6 in total. So with regards to the number of projects, what we see here, actually, these are the years that we found available data. There are no available data for 2015. in total, we see that less than a third of the projects of the ENI, of the European Neighbourhood Instrument, are implemented through the Core LEAP initiative, and we are discussing about projects that are geographically located in this area, in the eastern countries, that are in the eastern frontiers of the European Union. This is a slide with regards to, the projects, the percentage of projects implemented by recipient countries, and this is another slide with regard to the amount, the percentage of budget implemented by recipient countries geographically located in the Core LEAP initiative area. We again see that just for the years 2014, we see that approximately 45% of the budget, of the total budget of the European Neighbourhood Instrument, has been allocated geographically, at least in this area, in the eastern neighbourhood countries, Which countries? So here is another slide referring to allocation of projects per recipient country. Excluding 2015, we see that, interestingly, most of the projects have been allocated in Georgia. One might expect the projects would be allocated in Ukraine authorities, in Ukraine, general beneficiaries. Just allow me to say that when I'm referring to projects, I imply projects that have been implemented by any type of recipient. So here we see, for instance, and the two previous slides, we have seen projects implemented by beneficiaries in general. And by this, I would like just to clarify, to say that perhaps we are overambitious in our research effort in terms of we would like to see, and we expected to be able to identify, in fact, regions and municipalities or provinces, perhaps, because we are talking about subnational authorities all over Europe, which actually implement projects as coordinators. But unfortunately, this is not our case, because we have to do a lot of work. We have a lot of work to do in this part of our research in order to fully identify whether we are talking about regions, municipalities, private companies, non-governmental organizations, etc. So what the picture of this slide and the previous two shows that we are, I'm presenting actually findings, but we are not sure about the identity of the beneficiaries. We are absolutely sure about the geographical allocation of these projects, but a lot of work has to be done in terms of identifying the identity of beneficiaries. Trying to assess the whole project and the idea and the initial hypothesis. The ENP, through bilateral, multi-country and cross-border cooperation programs, address cooperation among the EU and the 6 partner countries. Subnational authorities, we argue, that can play actually an important role in the implementation phase of the ENP. And the Committee of the Region strives for further involvement in the formulation stage. However, preliminary findings for the 2007-2018 period show that less than a third of the ENI financial resources is implemented in the Eastern Neighbourhood. So further research, we argue, that is needed on fully identifying the SNA's financial mobilization. The objective of stability outside the EU board is quite ambitious also, and this is part of critique with regard to the European Neighbourhood policy. For instance, there are political tensions in this area, and another part of criticism says about the effectiveness of a coherent ENP, and that there are major challenges, for instance, migratory flows, particularly in the southern of the European Union, which are still ahead. So, concluding, some concluding remarks, the EU acts as an external catalyst for change with 6 of its system neighborhoods. We have focused on the Kornely initiative, and the activeness of the EU is facilitated by developing differentiated bilateral approaches for political, economic, and cultural reasons. Another conclusion could be that democracy building cannot be only a top-down process. First and foremost, it begins at the closest level of citizens. And we also sum up the Kornely initiative links the EU with its existing partners, thus allowing for promoting the idea of regional cooperation and further development in terms of promoting actually good governance in this area. So thank you very much for
So thank you very much, Mr. Oikonomou. I guess that you are not among the very optimistic about the importance of the European money spent in the Eastern Neighbourhood countries. I understand that there is a budget, there is a political will, but I don't know how this is making an actual result after so many years, because now we have many years after EU neighbourhood policy is implementing, and I don't know if how the people in these countries appreciate this help, this support, and if finally is this a budget well spent. We do have 2 more minutes, and I would like to ask your opinion for that.
My opinion, yes. Well, yes, I think that it is I wouldn't say highly, but I would say contested subject, whether money spent in this particular, through this initiative, through these initiatives and through the European Neighbourhood Instrument bring results, actual results for the citizens. I think that it is contested. It's a contested, let's say, there is a lot of discussion about that. On the other hand, I do believe that there are countries, at least the recipient countries and recipient authorities, municipalities, and for instance, regions in the recipient countries, either in the Eastern Neighbourhood area, southern part of the European Union, that highly appreciate the money that goes there. For instance, just came to my mind with regards to the southern, of course, initiative, the Ireland initiative, which is implemented in the southern part of the European, of the EU borders. And just came to my mind a project which is implemented by the Palestinian authorities. I mean, in an area, or more generally speaking, in areas where we do have problems in terms of political tensions, in terms of military, perhaps, engagements. So I do believe that outside the EU borders and in EU neighbourhood, there are recipients, there are beneficiaries, potential beneficiaries, who would highly appreciate EU help. I'm not quite sure with regards to the results of the overall outcomes of these projects, whether are good investments, let's say, from the EU, because, for instance, there are projects implemented regarding the promotion, the advancing, and of public administration in Azerbaijan, for instance, or in Armenia. But I'm not truly sure whether this money I would agree with you, and I'm not sure whether this money are good spent, a good investment for the EU. However, there must be some instrument.
Of course, and Europe has it needs to have that kind of policy. I mean, it's an actual need. The question is about the efficiency. But anyway, thank you very much for this. We will come to this issue because it seems it's an important issue. I will go to our next speaker, Mr. Othon Alexandros Kaminiaris Kondostavlos. He's a PhD student at the Department of Political Science and Public Administration and Policy at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. His topic is about the Europeanization of the Eastern Partnership countries as a criterion to potential EU members. Mr. Kaminiaris, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to be here with you today. First of all, let me share my screen with you. As our moderator already said, my topic is the Europeanization of the Eastern Partnership countries as a criterion for potential EU membership. The case of climate change is selected because my PhD thesis revolves around the impact of the EU climate change policy to its neighborhood, both in the East and the South. It's a work in progress, so I will share with you some thoughts on the research puzzle, the research questions, a preliminary analysis and discussion, and some thoughts on further research. My research puzzle begins with the ENP. Ever since I was an undergraduate student and I came into contact with the enlargement process, I always heard the term enlargement fatigue, and then when I was introduced to the ENP, I understood why. Based on the principles of conditionality and differentiation, the Eastern Partnership has developed a two-tier system accompanied by a respective institutional flexibility as far as the types of bilateral agreements signed, and groups of leaders and laggards in terms of reforms are created. But to what end? It seems that the everything but the institutions approach of the ENP and the more for more approach of the Eastern Partnership, respectively, are perceived and criticized as vague and as aiming to blur the boundaries of in and out of the EU, both by the leaders group aspiring to potential membership, which are Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, and by researchers as well. The starting point of my research puzzle is the enlargement process itself. Apart from the very well-known Copenhagen criteria of 1993, what problematizes me the most is the absorption and integration capacity, which was coined in 2006, 2007, and is about whether the EU can take in new members in a given moment or a given period without jeopardizing the political and policy objectives of the treaties. So it has a twofold meaning: the ability of the EU to prepare non-members for membership, that's the external aspect, and an internal aspect, meaning the ability to preserve its functioning and cohesion once those members join. But what happens to the countries that meet the Copenhagen criteria and are not offered the prospect of membership? So I formulated research questions. Are the Copenhagen criteria a necessary and or sufficient condition for countries to become potential candidates for EU membership? And is the Europeanization of the Eastern Partnership countries a necessary and or sufficient condition for them to become potential candidates for EU membership? The problem with the Copenhagen criteria is the fact that they are assessed by the EU, but they are not measured somehow, and the assessment only concern the Western Balkans, and there is no way to measure or compare the two sets of 6 states, the Eastern Partnership and the Western Balkans. So I suggest the introduction, the creation of an index, the Copenhagen Alignment or Approximation Index, which is a mega index to mirror the Copenhagen criteria. The index I suggest consists of 7 other well-known indexes. In the first criterion, the political one, in order to mirror it, I employ the democracy index of the varieties of democracy of the University of Gothenburg, the rule of law index of the World Justice Project, and the human rights index from the Friedrich Foundation for Freedom. In order to mirror the second criterion, I employ the Index of Economic Freedom from the Heritage Foundation, which is the in order to mirror the market economy aspect of their economies, and their competitiveness is measured through the Global Competitiveness Report of the World Economic Forum. I stumbled upon the third criterion, the institutional and administrative capacity of states to implement the EU acquis, because there is no such index measuring exactly those capacities of states. So I employed the Fragile States Index, which from the Fund for Peace, which consists of 4 groups of indicators, and one of them, the political indicators, somehow addresses to a certain extent those capabilities of states through state legitimacy and public services. So I formulate 2 hypotheses as well, that the Western Balkan countries would score higher than the Eastern Partnership because they have already been granted the status of potential candidates, meaning that they fulfill those criteria. And the fact that the leaders of the Eastern Partnership, the 3 countries, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, would score better than the laggards, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Belarus, because they are aspiring members and have signed the deep and comprehensive free trade agreements, account for about 65 to 70% of the EU acquis that they have to transpose to their legal systems. After extracting the index in a scale from 0 to 1, these are the scores of the 12 states. We see that Georgia scores the highest, then comes Montenegro, Albania. According to the hypothesis formulated, Ukraine scores very low to what comparing to what I expected. So for sure, the first step for a country is to meet the key criteria for accession. So the Copenhagen criteria are undoubtedly a necessary condition for granting the prospect of membership, but by no means are a sufficient one, as we see that states scoring high, for example, Georgia and Armenia, regardless if they have such aspirations, because Armenia does not and Georgia does, they are not granted this possibility. And even in the case of Turkey, for example, which is not included in this index, in which both sides have already abandoned the membership scenario, it has not been revoked institutionally, at least yet. And by the same token, despite the backsliding of the Western Balkans that has been taking place for some years now, they're not denied the prospects. However, we see also, for example, countries like Albania and North Macedonia scoring lower than Georgia and Armenia, respectively. They were recently, this year, granted the status of candidate countries. So even if the Copenhagen criteria are properly addressed or met, the problem of absorption capacity of the EU still remains. It is safe to suggest that the more aligned to the EU acquis a state is, the more Europeanized in a way, the easier it would be for the EU itself to absorb it and integrate it. Also, as stated earlier, the deep and comprehensive free trade agreements contain a great deal of the EU acquis. So the 3 countries that have signed them, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, are obliged to transpose about 2/3 of the acquis to their legal systems. But to what end? And this is where Europeanization jumps in as a possible criterion for membership, potentially able to answer the absorption or integration capacity problem. The Europeanization, in a wider sense, means becoming more European-like. The most famous definition of Europeanization is the one of Radaelli, according to which Europeanization is a process involving construction, diffusion, institutionalization of many elements, formal and informal rules, procedures, policy paradigms, styles, ways of doing things, and shared beliefs and norms, which are first defined and consolidated in the EU policy process, and then incorporated in the logic of domestic discourse, political structures, and public choices. Bearing in mind this definition, I suggest that the levels of Europeanization is an adequate and necessary criterion for potential membership, as depending on those levels, the enlargement process would be facilitated and accelerated, and vice versa, meaning that high levels of Europeanization would mean high readiness of a country and easier absorption or integration by the EU, and low levels would mean low readiness and difficult absorption by the EU. So it seems that neither the Copenhagen criteria nor the Europeanization are both necessary and sufficient conditions for membership. They are both necessary for sure, but they are jointly sufficient. So this is why we should examine them together. But what should we measure in this case? The deep and comprehensive free trade agreements. Studying them, the adherence or compliance of states to them would not paint the right picture. Besides, as is the case for the member states of the EU themselves, compliance does not necessarily mean effectiveness. So the simple transposition of the EU acquis by virtue of those agreements would not be an adequate indicator, as the fact that the state signs something does not mean that it will implement it as well. So a distinction should be made between formal and substantial compliance, because at first sight, formal compliance would cover the external integration capacity of the Union, meaning that the Union would have done anything that it could to prepare the members, but only formal compliance would infringe upon the internal integration capacity, if not accompanied by the substantial compliance. What should be measured should be general provisions of the Eastern Partnership, and I suggest that the environment should be employed, because the EU has made a big green turn in the past years. And if one were to ask what the EU is, the answers would be many and manifold. But some of the answers would definitely have to do about the environment, and specifically climate change. Three elements are consistently apparent in all the EU climate change policy throughout the years. From 2008, the climate and energy package with the famous 20-20-20 goals, which was the 20% drop of greenhouse gas emissions, the increase of 20% of the energy mix coming from renewable energy sources, and the 20% improvement of energy efficiency. These three elements remain for the 2030 climate and energy framework, which was issued in 2014 and revised in 2018, but the goals and the stakes are higher. And finally, the very ambitious climate neutrality goal of 2015 with the EU Green Deal. These elements have been incorporated in the Eastern Partnership as well since its inception in 2009, where there were six flagship initiatives. One of them was the good environmental governance and climate change prevention, where there was no greenhouse gas reduction provision. And the next year, another one of the six flagship initiatives was about energy, aiming to improve the energy efficiency and to expand the use of renewable energy sources. These three elements were crystal clear in the 2016 20 deliverables for 2020, whereby number 15 was aiming to the enhancement of the energy efficiency and the use of renewable energy sources, as well as to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. My whole point with this is that these three elements consist the climate change policy of the EU, and since the EU gives so much weight to the environment, the case of climate change as a Europeanization case for this for the Eastern Partnership is a great starting point for which unfortunately I yet do not have results. So what I will do is compose climate profiles of the 6 countries, consisting of their greenhouse gas emissions, their renewable energy sources, the levels of renewable energy sources in their energy mix, and their energy efficiency. And then according to the Europeanization theory, see whether or not there is a causal link between these the performance of the states in the specific sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaminiaris, for this very interesting presentation. When I was listening to you, I was thinking that the idea was to promote shared values, the idea of EU neighborhood policies. But are there really shared values? And this is not. This does not have a just judgmental dimension. But perhaps we, European Union, has to realize that the values are not the same all over the world, or even in our neighbors. And I was saying that I'm saying that because of your presentation about climate, and I wonder whether these countries are ready to adjust to these policies. And I would like a short comment for that.
Yes, of course. First of all, what the countries that concern me the most are those aspiring for membership, with the hypothesis that they will do more to align themselves with the EU acquis, even if it's described in the deep and comprehensive free trade agreements or not. Some of these provisions are included in those agreements, but this is where the substantial and formal compliance jumps in. The fact that they may sign those agreements doesn't mean that they will effectively implement them, of course. But this is a way to assess the EU itself as a normative power, which aspires to be, and as a leader in the global climate change arena. It's an aspiration from coined in 1990. It's leadership by example, a term coined by Simon Schulz. So I think it's very interesting to see whether the EU has the capacity or not to impact countries on such a subject that is very important, as we see, for the Union itself. So we'll have to see.
Of course, thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. I will go now to our next speaker, Nadia Bureiko from the Alexandru Ioan Cuza University of Iasi, and from the Policy Council of Ukrainian Prism. And I would like to give the floor to you regarding the testing of the efficiency of EU's neighborhood instruments in Ukraine. It seems that Ukraine is a key country, not only politically, but also geopolitically and economically. Therefore, the issue you're addressing is a key one. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. You see my screen?
No.
No.
You have to press the share button. Now.
Yes.
Yes.
Could you see it now? Okay,
yes,
great.
We can see the box on the right hand, not the presentation in full. We can see it.
Now?
We're still seeing a box about Dropbox, but okay, if you cannot.
If there is a way, just allow me to say, if there is a way to minimize this box, this window, or just put it aside.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry for this technical issue. I'm very glad to present now the results of our study we are conducting together with my colleague within the Jean Monnet network entitled Enacted European Union and its Neighbourhood Network for Enhancing EU's Actorness in its Eastern Borderlands. I'm starting with my presentation with nothing new for this panel, but the statement that in the recent couple of years, the EU has been significantly confronted by a range of challenges and threats within and also beyond its borders, including its immediate neighborhood. Over the last years, the EU's traditional approach, which has long been relied on attractiveness of its pull as a normative power, has been significantly questioned. Although there appear to be no alternative to pursuit of democracy and economic modernization epitomized by the EU, the capacity of the EU to sufficiently exert its external influence appeared to be rather limited for the time being. Why is the EU's actorness questioned? For instance, the Eastern Partnership Platform, intended to bring the post-Soviet Eastern European space into a more stable one. To which extent has it succeeded? I think it's more of a rhetoric question for today, given that concurrently there are conflicts in 5 of the 6 Eastern Partnership countries, and in addition, the ongoing developments in Belarus cannot be arguably described by the word of stability either. And taking this into account, the Eastern Partnership region have turned into a rather volatile region, having in mind the regional turmoil that was sparked off by the 2014 events in Ukraine, mainly the annexation of Crimea and the Russian aggression in the eastern regions of Ukraine, and also the ongoing geopolitical competition between the Russian Federation on one side and the Euro-Atlantic community on the other. All this has brought me to the following research question and argument. The present research inquires how the EU's actorness is perceived beyond its eastern borders, mainly in Ukraine, in those regions of Ukraine which have an immediate border with the European Union. We argue that despite of the EU's attempts to enhance its actorness in the region, the overall awareness of the EU and EU's impact is still rather modest, thus questioning the EU's ability to wield enough transformative power in the Eastern neighborhood. The theoretical background of this paper is structured around actorness. What is actorness? Actorness derives from a widely cited definition of an actor capability that is a measure of the autonomous unit's capacity, be it the international organization or a state, to behave actively in the relations to other actors in the international system. Actorness can be also understood as the capacity of an actor to define and pursue policies externally. Lately, the scholarship on actorness has been largely monopolized by the studies on the European Union's capacity to project its foreign policy internationally, first and foremost with a focus on the neighborhood. The key features for effective actorness are consistency and coherence, meaning the ability to identify the foreign policy priorities and to formulate coherent policies alongside with a shared commitment to a set of values, the ability of policy instruments such as military power, economic tools, sufficient diplomacy and negotiations. Moreover, what is also very salient are the self-perceptions of the EU and the way how it communicates its ability to exert this external influence beyond its borders. Concurrently, actorness is not determined only by the actor itself and this self-perception. So it's not only how the EU positions itself vis-a-vis its neighbors, but also it is largely influenced by external actions, actors' perceptions on the EU's roles and its initiatives, and the reactions of these external actors to the EU's initiatives. Given the scholarship on the EU external policy has largely highlighted the importance of these external perceptions over the EU's actions and policies, this research explores the societal perceptions vis-a-vis the efficiency of the EU's instruments and actorness in Ukraine. Just to briefly mention that actually this research is also focused on the other case, also on the case of Moldova. But for the purpose of this presentation, I decided to limit the empirical data and to focus only on Ukraine. So to this aim, on the take into account the importance of the external perceptions, we have chosen the survey methods, since surveys are arguably more preferable when the larger pool of respondents is being desired. And this study centralizes the survey questionnaire-based survey that was conducted in the border regions of Ukraine, in those administrative units which are called in Ukraine oblasts, which have an immediate border with the EU. Given why we decided to focus only on these border regions, because according to the literature, the Europeanization process is not limited only within the EU, it also goes beyond the European Union's borders and generates these visible external effects beyond the EU. The closer the regions, the stronger the effects. Therefore, we decided to apply first this questionnaire only in the borderland regions. And what is interesting? The filter question, the first filter question was whether everyone from our respondents has ever heard about the EU. We had the all positive answers to this question. And furthermore, we decided, we started exploring what is actually the general awareness of the EU. So 89.4% of respondents are interested in general to receiving regular updates about the EU itself and also in the way how the relations between Ukraine and the European Union are currently evolving. So there is this interest, there is this demand from the society on what is actually the EU. However, the level of general awareness of the EU has been reported as generally not that high. According to our results, 56.9% of respondents agree or somewhat agree that people in their country have limited information about the European Union. This could potentially be explained by the fact that population from Ukraine, our respondents regularly do not have this first-hand information on what actually the EU stands for the simple reason that they do not have regular encounters with the European Union. According to the survey, even if it was applied in those regions which are just at the border with the European Union, where the border is sometimes 20-30 kilometers far from the localities, the survey showed that 56.5% of respondents have never visited any European Union country in over the last 10 years. Furthermore, 1/3 of respondents replied that they have visited one of the EU countries up to 5 times in the last 10 years, and usually this is the closest locality that is just across the border. So usually the perceptions about the EU are framed through the media, and in Ukraine, among these respondents, the main source of receiving the information about the European Union and its developments is TV. There is limited knowledge about the projects supported and financed by the European Union at the level of the localities and the level of the regions. Interesting enough that these are the regions which are subjects and the main beneficiaries of the cross-border cooperation projects. However, in these regions, only 12.7% of respondents are aware of the existence of projects financed by the European Union at the level of their city or village, and only 16.1% of respondents are aware about the existence of the EU-financed projects at the level of their region. The overall awareness of the EU's presence in the country is much higher when the nationwide projects financed by the European Union are concerned. More than half of our respondents are aware that there are projects financed by the EU at the level of the country. Yet the Eastern Partnership Initiative has registered a very low visibility among the respondents. Less than 1/3 of our respondents are aware of the existence of such framework of cooperation between Ukraine and the European Union. Subsequently, the majority of our respondents, more than 60%, agree or somewhat agree that the EU has generally limited presence in Ukraine. In spite of this rather modest awareness of the EU's driven initiatives in the region, in the borderland regions, generally the EU is perceived through very positive connotations. So the EU is seen as a reliable partner, as a friendly partner, important partner for Ukraine, and usually it also generates kind of positive sentiments and perceptions among respondents who see the EU as the one that generates enthusiasm and hope for future. Democracy, market economy, human rights, economic prosperity are seen as the most associated with the EU. However, interesting that stability and security are still lagging behind as the associations with the EU. That might be possibly, it's our assumption, be explained with the EU's rather modest contribution to more efficiently contribute to the security crisis after Russian Federation annexed Crimea. The respondents are aware of the existence of cross-border cooperation projects as such. Up to 77% of respondents have heard about these projects. However, they do not find them efficient, and only 32.4% of respondents believe that this is the instrument that actually enhance the regional development of their regions. Furthermore, and this is kind of striking, that regardless of the fact that Ukraine has signed the association agreement with the European Union, Ukraine received visa-free regime, until now, around 31% of respondents believe that the relations of Ukraine with the European Union hasn't really much enhanced over the last 10 years if to compare with 2009 when the Eastern Partnership Initiative was launched. So this data actually show that regardless of the fact that the European Union has really initiated different instruments and tools to enhance the cooperation with Ukraine, and Ukraine actually is one of the most active countries in the Eastern Partnership countries in terms of fostering reforms and coming closer to the integration initiatives, integration platforms of cooperation. However, still the awareness of population about the EU initiatives in the borderland regions of Ukraine is still rather modest. And what the results of our survey signaled that one of the main problems concerns the strategies of communication of these initiatives in the region. What we are currently doing, we are also conducting focus groups in order to further explore what are the reasons of such limited awareness of the EU's presence and actors in the region, and hopefully for the paper that is currently still work in progress, we will also have new empirical data to back up also the results of this survey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I know that your research is undergoing, but I wonder if you have an indication on which direction the European Union has to go in order to have a more efficient communication strategy and campaign in Ukraine. Do you have any indications?
We do have our preliminary indications. So when we look at the grassroots, this bottom-up approach is very important. So it's of a great science to target broader society, because why we actually focus on these border regions? If we look at Kyiv, and if we apply the survey about the awareness of the EU in the capital, there the picture will be way much more positive. So it's very important to enhance these people-to-people contacts and to communicate them in a more efficient way, because very often, as was mentioned in the first presentation, there is this budget allocated to the implementation of the projects. The projects are implemented. However, they're still lacking the wider visibility. What is the added value of this project? So, very simple example, and that was also signaled. We also in our survey we had some open-ended questions. For instance, people might be aware that there is the exchange mobility programs, different mobility programs at the universities, right? So, however, they are not really aware via which support these mobility exchanges are possible, via which support, via which tools the new infrastructure projects implemented in the region. So it's not really enough to have only the logo and acknowledgement to the European Commission during the expert sessions, during the expert discussions, because everyone is really aware who is behind and what is the whole framework of this cooperation. However, for the enhancement of this awareness, what is the EU stands for at the level of grassroots, is really important to rethink this strategy, how to better tackle the audience on the ground.
It seems that, I mean, I do agree with you that we're missing the substance many times in the European Union. We follow the format, but we fail in the substance. But anyway, this is a live process. Thank you very much for this, for your input. I will go now to our final speaker, Mr. Charalambos Boubayatzoglou, who is an adjunct lecturer at the Pantheon University of Athens. His topic is the reversible path of Moldova to Europe. The floor is yours. Hello.
Hello. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm watching this session from my mobile phone because my laptop cannot function well, so I cannot share with you either my PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to speak to just see me.
Okay.
So speaking about Moldova, about a reversible path to Europe, that means that Moldova had a path. That path began mainly in 2009 when there was a governmental change and there was ascended to power the Alliance of European Integration that succeeded the communist government of 2001-2009. What were the advantages in order to get to the path? The first was that it's a very small that's a very small country. So whatever, So whatever financial assistance they have is getting a great impact on the country, on the finances of the country. So EU didn't have to allocate many resources. The second advantage is that it had the political will since 2009. And the third, that it never experienced an unconstitutional power of change. So the political culture is relatively calm and democratic, but relatively. However, this involvement by EU has created many critics against EU. Why? Because EU got directly involved in the domestic politics of Moldova and supported the European alliance, the pro-European alliance, that proved extremely corrupted. And that fact contributed so that citizens didn't view EU as an external catalyst for democracy. They also had the alternative choice of Russia. Why? Because it was part of Soviet Union. A great part of the Soviet apparatus was still there running, but not run from Russians. And there is the problem with Transnistria, that it's the Russian-speaking part that has seceded from Moldova. So what has happened since 2014, especially the elections of 2014 that were rigged, but EU didn't criticize the governing coalition for these electoral results, is that has happened a geopoliticization. That means that the discourse about democracy focused on geopolitics rather than democracy. What does this imply? It means that Russia, on the one hand, wants, how can I say, its part has some conditionality instruments. Russia's conditionality instruments are not that strict. They are goal-oriented, they come with blackmails, but they are not strict. They are not tied to certain conditions and preconditions like the ones posed by EU or IMF. On the other hand, EU has a very strict conditionality policy. That means that all the resources are allocated as long as the specific criteria are met. So this flexibility is easier for Moldovan citizens to accept Russia as a patron state when EU supports a very corrupted government that has, especially in 2014, there was published a big fraud scandal, a big bank scandal that there was an embezzlement of around $1 billion by the prime minister and other from his court. So the other instrument that Russia has is the Moldovan Orthodox Church that is tied to Russia. Moldova has two churches. The one is the Bessarabian Church that is tied to Romania, and the other is the Moldovan, that is tied to Russia. For the more conservative Moldovan citizens or the elderly Moldovan citizens, the Russian Orthodox Church provides a great ideological backup. That means that a big part of Moldovan citizens wants Russia as the patron state. And since EU doesn't have efficiency, rapid efficiency, okay, there was visa liberalization, there was association agreements, there were the free trade agreements, but the Moldovan citizens want something more efficient, more handproof, more rapid. So the problem is exactly that Russia can deliver instantly, but EU, because of all these procedures, democratic procedures that has within, cannot deliver instantly. The other problem for the conditionality is that Russia can see when the political cost, the political benefit can outweigh the political cost. Because of this flexibility that I said before. So then comes a paradox. In 2014, we have the Crimea issue. We expect from Moldovan citizens in Moldova to be wary of Russia and its resourcefulness to violence, its ability to use violence, its determinacy. But that didn't happen. That didn't happen because in 2014, what happened is that Russia established two pro-Russian parties, the Socialist Party and the Democratic Party. And its alliance and the people that got that alliance are Plahotniuk is the one name, I'm sorry, but I don't know how it's preferred properly. And Igor Dodon, that is the president now of Moldova. Plahotniuk is the most rich person in Moldova, and it's what we call an oligarch by the Russian standards. It has a lot of money, it has created many clientelistic networks, and has managed to shift the corruption networks in his favor. So what is the problem here in Moldova, and what is this reverse of the European path? The first problem is corruption. The second is the government inefficiency. For example, with every governmental change, there is a change of the higher office of many officials in the government. The most prominent example is the judicial system. The Supreme Court has changed many justices before, judges has changed many judges during its tenure. The other problem is that what Lusane calls pluralism by default. That means that the society is very fragmented, is really fragmented. There is political pluralism because of this, but because there are formed unstable governing coalitions, no coalition can be committed to prolonged reforms for a great amount of time. So whatever reforms and whatever political will you have for reforms stops because the government coalitions are unstable, or they are very, very diverse. For example, the two main opponents is the party of Plahotniuk and the party of Filat, but they now are governing coalition. I don't know if you understand. If we say it in Greek, it's like New Democracy in Syriza made a government coalition right now. It's kind of awkward. So this situation causes a great political instability. And we come to what the Moldovan citizens want. They want stability. They don't want to feel insecure about the next day, their jobs, their earnings. So what they value most? They value the stability that Soviet regime had to offer. They don't want to return to totalitarianism. They want the stability of the welfare system that the Soviet regime had to offer. So the polls showed exactly that. A great nostalgia for the Soviet period, but only for the finance and the welfare. So, in order to conclude my presentation, I have to say that the reversible path of Moldova to Europe is due to EU's great involvement that accelerated and enhanced corruption, the counterweight of Russia that shifted the corruption networks to its own proxy politicians, and a problem of identity in Moldova. Because of this secessionist conflict in Transnistria, the issue is, in order to again integrate Transnistria that are Russian speaking, what should the country do? should it stay aligned to EU in order to be democratic and earn more money, develop economically, or should it integrate the lost territory, so align closer with Russia? And I have concluded.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for this presentation. I understand that there are many challenges ahead us regarding the EU neighborhood policies, but I also understand that it takes two to tango. So before concluding, since we do have some more time, I would like to ask you, which is the single priority for each side, let's say for the European Union and the neighborhood countries, to effectively promote and implement these policies? Which is the one priority for each side? And I would like to start from Mr. Oikonomou.
Well, yes, thank you. I believe that if there is something that could add value to the European neighborhood policy and could facilitate its implementation, and in general its added value, I would argue about the role of the subnational authorities. And what I mean by that is that promoting, advancing the role in in different stages actually of the policy cycle of this particular policy field. For instance, not only in the implementation phase, but actually, perhaps just an idea, I'm just saying an idea, in earlier stages, policy stages of this particular policy field, perhaps this could, give some added value in the European neighborhood policy and could actually give space to more actors which are closely connected with citizens, they do have the capacity and the expertise of how implementing the principle of subsidiarity, for instance. So as personally, I believe that by promoting, advancing, facilitating the role of subnational institutions, be it either regional authorities, provinces, or municipalities, I believe that by this we may take the most of the European neighborhood policy.
Thank you very much for that comment. I just want to apologize. I have just realized that we have finally one more speaker that has just appeared on my screen now. So I would like to apologize for that, for Mrs. Lebanidze. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, Mr. Lebanidze. Your topic is about security and democracy in Eastern Partnership countries, and I would like your input. Mr. Lebanidze is a research associate at the Friedrich University in Jena.
Much, I guess it's great. Can you see my screen, my presentation?
Not yet, but I hope that okay, we can see it now. Yes.
Okay, great. May I ask how many minutes do I have for this?
We do have 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay, great. Okay, then I'll briefly present my paper. It's actually a collaborative paper. There are two other authors who could not be here today. And also, I should mention this paper, it is based on research project, which is financed by Youth Horizon 2020 program. It's called EURISCO, and therefore I'll start probably by briefly introducing the conceptual framework of this project, because this paper pretty much is based on this project. So EURISCO, it's abbreviation for Europe's external action and the dual challenges of limited statehood and contested orders. And it's pretty much based on this use foreign policy or use new global strategy, as they call it, with a focus on resilience and managing resilience and integrative crisis management, as they call it. Well, it starts with an assumption that EU neighborhood, basically almost every country in EU neighborhood is marked by the so-called areas of limited statehood and contested orders. So those two concepts, they are kind of default condition for majority of EU neighborhood countries. So areas of limited statehood, they are basically the parts of the country which are outside of control of central authorities. In Eastern Partnership countries, they would have form of territorial conflicts, for instance. And contested orders are defined as incompatibilities between two or more competing views about how political or social or economic life should be organized. So, yeah, one example would be Arab Spring events in Mediterranean countries or Euromaidan protests in Ukraine. So, areas of limited statehood and contested orders, they are not threats to use security and stability per se, but they start becoming threats when they turn occasionally into governance breakdowns and violent conflicts, because they tend to turn in those time to time, and in doing so, then they become threats to European Union security. And therefore, the main idea and main task of this project is to think about conditions and think about use preemptive strategies, how areas of limited statehood and contested orders can be contained, and how can we avoid them turning into violent conflicts and governance breakdowns in EU neighborhood countries. And to do so, then this concept of resilience comes into analysis. And we mostly rely on the definition of resilience, which is provided by European Union's global strategy. And one important thing is also that in most time EU speaks about societal resilience, not just resilience, as other actors do. And in doing so, they try not to confuse resilience with strategies of boosting of authoritarian stability of non-democratic incumbent regimes. Therefore, we also stick to societal resilience and not just resilience. So strengthening society and not necessarily state institutions only. Okay, so this is a brief recap of this project, and here is also on this graph a simple graphic representation of this conceptual framework. So basically, we have those areas of limited statehood and contested orders as a default condition in EU neighborhood countries. And then we have certain risks. Some of them are global, some of them are local, and those risks then tend to aggravate the impacts of areas of limited state and contested orders, and they can then lead to violent conflict and governance breakdown. And then comes resilience into play. If societal resilience is too strong, then in ideal case, it leads to peaceful change and strengthening of state and societal structures. But if resilience is weak, then it ends up in violent conflict and governance breakdown. And if resilience is moderate, then it leads to continuity of conditions of areas of limited statehood and contested orders. And again, this all is pretty much based on EU's recent turn in neighborhood policy and generally in foreign policy. As you know, EU started this new global policy agenda in 2016 and also ENP review in 2015. And in both of those documents, the main innovative topic that was introduced, innovative concept, is resilience, and it is pretty much based on strengthening resilience in other countries. Okay, to our paper, which is still work in progress, and it focuses mostly on two countries of Eastern Partnership, Georgia and Ukraine. And the main question, and we have three research questions, but the main question is the third one in red color. To what extent EU has been able, or EU has been successful in mitigating risks and strengthening sources of resilience in Georgia and Ukraine? And to do so, we also have two other, it's called sub-questions. So what are the main local and global risks affecting Georgia and Ukraine? And how strong is societal resilience in two countries?
Just to remind you that we have only 9 minutes until.
Only 9 minutes. Okay, that's enough. Thank you. Okay, so then of course, we have areas of limited settlement and order contestation in both Ukraine and Georgia, as I mentioned, in a form of territorial conflicts, and also order contestation, and many examples of order contestation, such as, for instance, post-election protests or for instance, conflict in eastern Ukraine since 2014, or violent protests also, which have been present both in Ukraine and Georgia. So there are many cases of both of those concepts present in both countries. And then we have risks, which very often lead to violent conflicts and governance breakdowns. And though some of those risks can be of domestic nature, some of those risks can be of external nature. So the domestic risks are, for instance, the oligarchy, state capture, and power grab by ranking elites, general socioeconomic underdevelopment, and suboptimal institutional designs, etc., etc. So if aggravated, those risks then can lead to violent protests or violent conflicts and governance breakdowns, and therefore they should be mitigated by strengthening resilience by the EU and other external actors. Then they're associated with external players, such as, first of all, we should also, of course, mention Russia and its stabilizing role in both countries. But not only Russia, we have also other global risks that negatively affect the resilience of two countries and can lead to violence and governance breakdowns in both of them. Speaking of resilience, we did some empirical research, and resilience and according to our data, resilience is moderate in both countries. There is some basic level of societal resilience, but it's not very strong, and it needs assistance by external actors. So if we break down the resilience in 3 dimensions: social trust, social legitimacy of governance actors, and effective institutions, so we can see that in Ukraine and Georgia, on all 3 dimensions, we have rather moderate societal resilience with some basic adaptive capacities, but too weak to solve problems associated with conflict areas and other challenges on their own, because that's why they need the assistance of external actors. And maybe 2 more slides and I'm finished. Turning to EU's resilience building agenda in Ukraine and Georgia. So basically the external actors, according to the framework of EU external actors, can promote resilience in 2 ways. So one is directly mitigating the risks. For instance, I don't know, the impact of Russia or socioeconomic problems, etc., or strengthening the sources of resilience, legitimacy, social trust, and effectiveness of institutions. And then we screened majority of EU programs and platforms in Ukraine and Georgia. So we are still working on it, but these are those preliminary results, and we identified few programs and few initiatives that has been quite effective in strengthening sources of resilience. For instance, EU-induced public administration decentralization reforms both in Ukraine and Georgia, which boosted the profile of local governance actors in both countries, and indirectly also contributed to increase of societal resilience. Also, EU recently adopted inclusive approach to different actors, and it changes state-centric and it included in its programs also civil society organizations and, for instance, the Orthodox churches, and it also kind of boosted the youth profile and youth capacities to strengthen societal resilience in both countries. So this is about sources of resilience, but the other mechanism how you can strengthen resilience is by mitigating the impacts of risks. Here, picture is a little bit more diffuse. So on the one hand, in terms of domestic risks, EU has enough capacity to keep it in control by utilizing democratic conditionality whenever necessary and putting a lot of pressure on authorities in both countries. However, when it comes to external and global risks, first of all, Russia, here EU has been less successful or moderately successful. Okay, to some extent, it managed to stabilize the situation in conflict areas and in terms of border contestation in both countries, but still the threats to governance breakdown and violent conflicts are not entirely mitigated, and this is also because EU lacks many instruments of military and security actorness, and also is very moderate when it comes to, for instance, utilizing the CSDP capabilities in Eastern Partnership countries. So this is also a work in progress. We are still working on it, but those are the preliminary results, and to again, use resilience building capacity in the neighborhood countries. On examples of Georgia and Ukraine, EU has been more or less successful in strengthening societal resilience, sources of resilience, also successful in mitigating local risks, but EU has not been successful in mitigating global and security risks, first of all, the impact of Russia in Georgia and Ukraine. Okay, I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With this very useful conclusion, we'll have. I would like to thank you very much for your participation. I would like to thank also the organizers, the University of Peloponnese, the Department of Political Science and International Relations, the National Center for Research on Europe, the Center for Southeastern European Studies, the University of Canterbury, and University of Graz, and of course the Martin Center for European Studies and the Hans Seidel Foundation for their support. I would like to thank you for being here today with us, and I hope that you will enjoy the rest of this conference. Thank you very much indeed. Bye.